Before World War II kicked off, Germany was getting ready for a new type of warfare. They imagined battles that moved fast, with tanks and soldiers working smoothly together. This idea was called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. They wanted vehicles that could keep up with tanks and provide protection for soldiers. That's where the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, or SDKFZ 251 for short, came in. The SDKFZ 251 was an armored vehicle designed to transport troops right to the front lines. It was like an early version of what we now call an armored personnel carrier. The key people behind its development were engineers and designers at Germany's Hanomag company. They were tasked with creating something that was sturdy yet mobile enough to handle rough battlefields. The first model of the SDKFZ 251 rolled out in 1939, right before Germany invaded Poland and kicked off World War II. It had a cool, angled shape to help deflect bullets. This was all about keeping soldiers safe as they traveled into combat. The vehicle could carry about 10 soldiers plus a driver and a commander. It was equipped with a machine gun for basic defense, and its armor was thick enough to provide decent protection against small arms fire and shrapnel. Under the hood, the SDKFZ 251 used a 6-cylinder engine that could go up to about 55 kilometers per hour on roads. It wasn't super fast by today's standards, but it was enough to keep up with tanks of the time. The tracks on the back helped it move through mud and rough terrain, which was crucial in the types of fast-moving battles Germany planned to fight. There were a few hiccups, though. The armor of the early models was not completely bulletproof, and the open top meant the soldiers inside were vulnerable to grenades and artillery shells from above. Plus, it took a lot of materials and labor to build each one, which meant they couldn't be produced quickly enough to meet demand as the war went on. As the war progressed, different versions of the SDKFZ 251 were made. Some carried heavy weapons or even radios for communication. The German army ended up using over 15,000 of them throughout the conflict, which showed how central they were to Germany's tactics. So why does all this matter today? Well, the SDKFZ 251 was a pioneer in its field. It showed how important it was for armored vehicles to work closely with tanks and infantry in modern warfare. This idea is still really important to armies around the world today. Every time you see a military vehicle rolling down the road, there's a bit of the SDKFZ 251 in its design and purpose. Understanding the SDKFZ 251 helps us see how technology and strategy work together in war. It's a perfect example of how military needs drive innovation, changing how wars are fought and influencing the tools soldiers use even now. By looking back at vehicles like the SDKFZ 251, we get a clearer picture of how past generations dealt with challenges, which factors into how today's military equipment is designed. In the late 1930s, Germany was gearing up for a major conflict. World War II was just around the corner, and military leaders wanted a vehicle that could move soldiers across rough terrain quickly and safely. They needed something new that could keep up with fast-moving tanks in battle. That's where the SDKFZ 251, also known as the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, came in. The main company responsible for creating this vehicle was Hanomag, a German company known for its engineering skills. The project was led by a team of smart engineers who were determined to build something unique. One key person was Josef von Glatter-Goetz, who played a big role in the vehicle's design. The idea behind the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 was to make a half-track vehicle. This means it had wheels in the front and tracks at the back. Tracks are like the ones you see on tanks, allowing the vehicle to go over rough ground without getting stuck. The development team went through several models, making improvements along the way. In the end, the final design combined speed, durability, and protection. So how did the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 work? Imagine a truck with a front engine, but instead of regular wheels in the back, you have tracks. This setup helped the vehicle drive over mud and sand, which regular trucks could not handle. It could carry up to 12 soldiers, plus a couple of crew members. The outer shell was made from armor plates, offering some protection against bullets and shrapnel. For defense, it was equipped with mounted machine guns on top. But creating the perfect vehicle was not easy. One of the main problems was keeping the weight down. Too heavy, and it would be hard to move. Too light, and it would not protect the soldiers enough. The engineers had to figure out the right balance. They also needed to ensure that the vehicle's tracks were strong, but could still be repaired quickly if damaged. Once these challenges were sorted out, the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 saw action all over Europe. It became a key part of Germany's strategy, moving soldiers quickly to where they were needed on the battlefield. Over 15,000 units were made, with several different versions for specific tasks, like carrying supplies or commanding troops in combat. Today, people study the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 to understand how military vehicles have evolved. It's interesting because it set standards for future designs. Armies around the world took note of this half-track design and used similar concepts in their vehicles. Even now, the basic idea of combining speed, protection, and all-terrain capability is a key part of military vehicle design. Why does any of this matter now? Well, looking at how the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 was made and used helps us learn about innovation and problem-solving in tense situations. Plus, it teaches us about the importance of adapting technology for different needs. Whether you're into military history, engineering, or just cool vehicles, the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 is a great example of how thoughtful design can make a big impact, both in history and even today. During the chaos of World War II, armies were always on the lookout for better ways to move troops and equipment. The German army needed a vehicle that was both tough and flexible, something that could handle different kinds of missions. This is where the SDKFZ 251, a half-track vehicle, came into play. Before we dive into its role, a bit of background. In the mid-1930s, Germany's military was gearing up for expansion. They wanted vehicles that could support an army on the move. The half-track design, which combines wheels at the front and continuous tracks at the back, was seen as a perfect solution. It offered better off-road performance than trucks and more flexibility than tanks. The main people responsible for the SDKFZ 251 were the engineers and designers at Hanomag, the company that developed it. They worked with the German military to create a vehicle that could fit many roles. Adolf Hitler and his generals were keen on vehicles that could boost their army's mobility, and the SDKFZ 251 played right into that vision. So, what exactly happened on the battlefield? The SDKFZ 251 was first introduced in 1939, and from then on, it became a familiar sight in many battles. It was used to carry troops, which was its primary role. The vehicle could hold a squad of 10 soldiers, allowing them to stay protected from small arms fire and shrapnel as they traveled across rugged terrain. This was important because it meant troops could reach the front lines faster and more safely. Apart from transport, the SDKFZ 251 was also adapted for many other tasks. Its basic framework allowed for over 20 different versions, including ones with mounted guns, radio equipment for communication, and even rocket launchers for additional firepower. This versatility was a game-changer, as it could switch roles depending on the need of the moment. Understanding the technical side can be simple. The SDKFZ 251 had a 6-cylinder engine that powered both the front wheels and the rear tracks. In essence, it was a blend of a truck and a tank. The tracks helped it move over mud, sand, and snow better than any regular wheeled vehicle. This adaptability was crucial in the many different terrains of Europe. But there were problems too. the design, while innovative, wasn't without its flaws. The armored plating was thin, which meant it was vulnerable to anti-tank weapons and artillery. This made it essential for the vehicle to be used smartly, often needing to avoid direct combat and sticking to safer routes. Additionally, producing such versatile vehicles was costly and time-consuming, which limited their numbers. In terms of results, the SDKFZ 251 truly enhanced the German military's ability to wage war with flexibility. It was an important component in the Blitzkrieg tactic, allowing rapid advances that caught enemies off guard. However, as the war dragged on, the challenges in maintaining and producing these vehicles increased, impacting their effectiveness. Why should this matter today? The story of the SDKFZ 251 highlights an early example of how military technology aimed at versatility can shape outcomes in warfare. For the modern world, it underscores the continued need for adaptable technologies in complex environments. It also offers a lesson in how innovation and practicality must balance with the realities of production and use in wartime scenarios. Ultimately, the SDKFZ 251 is a reminder of how thoughtful design and flexibility on the battlefield can influence war strategies and outcomes. During the 1930s, as tensions in Europe rose, the German military was looking for new ways to transport troops quickly and safely across battlefields. This led to the creation of the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, often called the SDKFZ 251. Basically, it was an armored vehicle that could carry soldiers around without putting them in harm's way as much. By the time World War II kicked off, this vehicle was ready to make its mark. Heinz Guderian was one of the key figures behind the use of these vehicles. He was a German general who believed in a fast and powerful way of fighting called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war in German. Guderian's idea was to move quickly, strike hard, and use tanks and armored vehicles like the SDKFZ 251 to get the job done. Thanks to him and others like him, these vehicles became super important. The SDKFZ 251 made a big impact in several major World War II campaigns. During the invasion of Poland in 1939, they showed how they could move troops quickly, which was a surprise for the Polish forces. Then, in 1940, during the Battle for France, these vehicles helped the German army to move swiftly, bypassing lines of defense and capturing Paris faster than anyone expected. The German army used them again during Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when they invaded the Soviet Union. This time, the vast distances of the Soviet land made the SDKFZ 251 vital for getting troops where they needed to be. Now let's talk about how these things worked. The SDKFZ 251 weighed around 8 tons and could carry 10 soldiers along with 2 crew members. It had a front wheel and track system. The front wheels helped with steering, and the tracks made it possible to move over rough ground. Powered by a Maybach engine, it could hit speeds of about 34 miles per hour on roads. Some versions even had a machine gun mounted on top to protect against attacks. Despite their usefulness, there were some challenges. For one, they weren't completely bulletproof. Soldiers inside could still be vulnerable, especially from above. Another problem was communication. Often, troops in these vehicles found it hard to stay in touch with commanders due to radio equipment limitations. Plus, harsh weather could sometimes slow them down or even make them break down. These challenges didn't stop the SDKFZ 251 from being used in nearly every German campaign. In North Africa, they were part of the Afrika Korps under General Erwin Rommel. In Italy, they helped the German army combat the advancing Allied forces. By the end of the war, over 15,000 units had been built, proving just how useful they were. So, why should we care about the SDKFZ 251 today? Understanding these vehicles helps us learn how armored transport evolved and became critical in military strategy. Today, countries around the world use similar vehicles for moving troops safely. By studying the past, we get a better understanding of how technology and innovation have shaped modern warfare. And that's pretty cool to know. In the thick of World War II, soldiers from both sides faced tough conditions as they engaged each other. The German army had a tool that many found interesting, the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, better known as the SDKFZ 251. It wasn't just any vehicle, it was a half-track, meaning it had wheels in the front and tracks in the back, allowing it to tackle different terrains. As the war developed, the German military needed a way to move soldiers and equipment quickly and safely. This need led to the creation of the SDKFZ 251, a vehicle well suited for the task. Designed by Hanomag, it combined the accessibility of trucks with the off-road capabilities of tanks. The tracks were great for rough roads and muddy fields, making it valuable on the often challenging World War II battlefields across Europe. Among the key players using the SDKFZ 251 were the German panzer divisions. These units included tanks and other armored vehicles. The soldiers in these divisions relied on the half-tracks to keep up with the fast-moving tanks. Inside, it could carry up to 12 men with their gear, providing both transportation and some protection from bullets and shrapnel. As for how it worked, the SDKFZ 251 had an armored exterior that covered its engine and main body, offering some defense. The vehicle was usually armed with a machine gun, giving soldiers a way to fight back if needed. Powered by a Maybach engine, it could reach speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour, pretty decent for its time. This allowed the troops to reach the front lines quicker and safer than if they had to go on foot. But it wasn't perfect. Soldiers often complained about the vehicle's limited protection. While the armor could stop small arms fire and shrapnel, it was not tough enough to withstand direct hits from larger weapons like anti-tank guns. Another issue was maintenance. Keeping the vehicle running smoothly required constant attention, and parts sometimes were hard to come by, especially as the war dragged on and resources became scarce. Despite these challenges, the SDKFZ 251 was used in various operations. One example was during the invasion of Poland in 1939 and later in Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union. The vehicle proved essential in providing the firepower and mobility required in these fast-paced offensives. In the end, the SDKFZ 251 did not win the war for Germany, but it did make an impact. Its design influenced future military vehicles with its balance of speed and protection. For young soldiers who rode in them, they were both a shield and a lifeline, providing a small measure of safety amidst the chaos of battle. Today, the SDKFZ 251 serves as a reminder of how military technology evolved during World War II. It shows how innovation in vehicle design can directly affect the lives of soldiers and the outcome of conflicts. While the war itself is a part of history, the lessons learned from vehicles like the SDKFZ 251 continue to inform modern military strategies and the development of new technology even now. After World War II ended in 1945, the world was left picking up the pieces. Countries were thinking about how to avoid future conflicts and how to get better at being prepared. One of the things they looked at was military equipment, including the SDKFZ 251. This vehicle, made by Germany during the war, had some interesting effects on how things shaped up afterwards. The SDKFZ 251 was basically a half-track, which means it used wheels in the front and tracks in the back. This design gave it a superpower. It could go over rough ground that normal trucks couldn't handle. The SDKFZ 251 was mainly meant to carry soldiers, with room for about a dozen people inside. It was like a tough bus for the battlefield. On top of that, it had a machine gun mounted for protection. During the war, these vehicles became pretty useful for the German army. They were part of a strategy called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which was all about moving quickly and striking fast. The SDKFZ 251 helped move troops across tough terrain at speed, backing up tanks and spreading out infantry across the battlefield. But let's talk about what happened after the war. When peace finally came, countries like the United States and the United Kingdom started looking at how to make their military forces more flexible and mobile. The SDKFZ 251 was one of the vehicles they paid attention to. Military experts saw how useful it was in getting troops in and out of trouble spots in a hurry. Many countries started developing their own versions of armored vehicles that could transport soldiers safely and quickly. This thinking led to the creation of new types of vehicles in the years after the war, like the United States M113 Armored Personnel Carrier. There were challenges, though. First, technology from the war was already changing quickly. Engineers had to work on improving engines, armor, and weapons to keep up with new demands. Another problem was the cost. Building advanced vehicles wasn't cheap, and countries needed to balance spending on military power with rebuilding their economies. But here's what happened because of this. The ideas from the SDKFZ 251 contributed to the development of today's armored vehicles. You know those big, tough machines you often see in Army footage? Many of them have roots tracing back to what people learned from using and designing the SDKFZ 251. So why should you care about some old military vehicle? Well, it shows us how past inventions influence today's technology. The SDKFZ 251 played a big part in the shift to more mobile, flexible military tactics. This is important because it changed how armies think about moving troops around quickly and safely, something that's still very relevant in modern warfare. Understanding the legacy of vehicles like the SDKFZ 251 helps us see why armies invest in new technologies. It highlights how innovations from the past continue to shape strategies used by military forces around the world today. So, while it might be an old vehicle now, its impact lives on, leaving a trail that's worth learning about and understanding. By the late 1930s, Europe was on the brink of World War II. Germany, under Adolf Hitler, was building up its military forces. One key part of this was making sure their army could move fast and hit hard. They wanted their soldiers to be quick and protected, even when they were on the move. This is where the SDKFZ 251 comes in. The Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, or SDKFZ 251 for short, was a half-track vehicle. This means it had wheels at the front and tracks like a tank at the back. This design helped it move over rough ground. It started being used by the German Army in 1939, just as the war was starting. The main person behind this design was Heinrich Ernst Kniepkamp, an engineer who worked on many German military vehicles. His team had the job of making something that could keep up with tanks and protect the soldiers inside. At first, the SDKFZ 251 was used to transport infantry or foot soldiers to the battlefield. It could carry up to 12 soldiers, along with the driver and a machine gunner. This was key to Germany's Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, tactics. They wanted to move fast and strike quickly, surprising their enemies. The half-track's armor was thin, only about 14.5 millimeters at its thickest, so it did not stand up well to heavy gunfire, but it was enough to protect against small arms and shell splinters. There were different versions of the SDKFZ 251. Some had more armor, others were fitted with different weapons. One version even had rocket launchers. The vehicle was powered by a 6-cylinder engine, which could reach speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour on roads. This helped the German army stay on the move, though it had its issues too. One big problem was that the SDKFZ 251 could be hard to handle. The tracks needed a lot of maintenance, and it could be tough to steer. If the weather was bad, or if they were going through muddy ground, it could get stuck. Plus, as the war went on and Allied forces got better weapons, the half-tracks were more vulnerable. They did not have the heavy armor of tanks, so they had to be careful about where they were used. By the end of the war, more than 15,000 SDKFZ 251 vehicles had been made. Though they never became as famous as tanks like the Panzer, they played an important role in Germany's strategy. They allowed soldiers to move quickly and stay protected, which was a key part of the fast-moving warfare that defined the early years of World War II. So why should we care about the SDKFZ 251 today? Well, it was an early example of the kind of armored vehicles used by armies around the world now. Plus, this vehicle helped shape how strategy was developed in modern warfare, showing just how important it is to be both quick and protected. By remembering the SDKFZ 251, we see how technology was constantly changing during World War II. It is a reminder of how innovation is often driven by necessity and how military technology can influence battles. Understanding these vehicles gives us a better picture of how the past has helped shape the vehicles and tactics of today.